Thank you, Richard. I've rarely been received so warmly. That really was a very nice. I had to correct something that I think it was Mr. Bush said, that I was from Lancashire. Well, it's true, I was born in Lancashire. I was born in Cleveleys in Lancashire, just outside Blackpool. But I was only there for a week. My mother had been sent up there by my father because I was born in 1944, and our house got bombed. Even in the womb, I seemed to hear the sounds of bombs, and my father got very upset and insisted that she should take a train from Euston Station, which has had a certain influence in my life, as I'll tell you. And that she should come northwards with me, 8.5 months pregnant, and the money ran out at Blackpool. She went and got a cab, went to the Queen's Hydro in Cleveleys, and that's where I was born. I haven't been back there since. I promise you, I haven't. I've only been back to Lancashire about twice. Is that okay? Can I? Yeah. I'm a southerner, I know you'd much prefer that. The date was April the 5th, 1970. And it was my first day as a reporter for the BBC. For BBC in those days, BBC Radio. And I was really very excited. My first day. And my boss, who was as new as I was, came rushing in and he said, all the newspapers are full of stories about how Harold Wilson, then Prime Minister, is going to call a general election. And he said, Harold Wilson is going to be leaving from Euston Station to his constituency at Huyton at 11 o'clock this morning. So I want you to go along there and I want you to ask him if he is going to call an election. My boss was very new in the job, not quite as new as I was, but he had about 2 weeks over me, and he didn't know that this was not what you did. Anyway, I turned up at platform 7 at Euston Station, and we'll say this is Harold Wilson, because he was a short little man. And he comes down the platform, you see, to get into his specially designated coach to go up to Huyton, with a collection, as Prime Ministers do, of security men and officials and God knows who. A station master sort of backing in front of him and bowing every now and then, beating his forehead on the ground. And so I look around. I was late. It's a habit I've not really been able to throw off in 38 years. And so therefore I had to stand in front of everybody. There were about 50 or 60 cameramen, photographers, and other journalists, because this seemed to be a good and interesting moment in British history. Was Harold Wilson going to call a general election? So I'm standing in front of all these people saying, come on, Sonny, out of the way, we're trying to get a photograph here. And I was sort of dodging and apologising. Harold Wilson comes down, and I think somebody's going to ask him, of course. And then nobody does. They all just smile at him as he comes past, and he smiles back at them. I thought, well, somebody had to be. So I stepped forward and said to him, as it were here, excuse me, Prime Minister, but I wonder, obviously it's a matter of national interest, and it's been all over the newspapers in recent days, that you might be thinking about calling an election. Is that true? Actually, I didn't say any of that, because I got as far as, excuse me, pry, when my world started to collapse around me, because the Prime Minister of my nation reached out for the microphone, started wrestling it out of my hand, and punched me really hard in the stomach. Now, there were those who suggested that Harold Wilson wasn't one of Britain's finest prime ministers, even though he came from here. I do understand that there is a certain local patriotism that may want you to support him. But anyway, he wasn't universally regarded. But I can tell you, he had a really good left punch. And I was just left there, and everybody passing by, all the journalists laughing at me, and Wilson says, "This is the most outrageous thing that's been done. I shall complain directly to your Director General the moment I get to Highton." And then they left. And I was standing there, and I looked at my watch, and it was 5 to 11 on my first day as a reporter, and I'd been physically assaulted by the Prime Minister, and I'd lost my job. Now, somebody, and I think it was you, Mr. Lamb, said that you didn't know what it was that kept people here so much together, this particular school. Well, I know very little about your school. I've known about it for decades. Of course, I've heard about it, even in London. But actually, in wider places than London, because I've met people who are here today in Brussels when I was there, very distinguished diplomat then, and also very distinguished diplomat nowadays in Kosovo. So I know very much a lot about your school. But what it is partly is those lovely buildings of yours. That sense that there's a place that you belong, that you can look at, that you can go back to, that you can revisit, that you can protect, perhaps even spend your own money on and give gifts to. And it's a very important thing. I went to a school which, if I dare to say so, has a 99-year advantage on yours, in that it was founded in 1509. But one day in 1966, not very long actually before I was punched by Harold Wilson, and only a matter of a few weeks before I joined the BBC, in fact, they pulled my school down and they rebuilt it in another place. They rebuilt it okay, it's fine. Of course now, a modern building being what it is, it needs to be pulled down yet again and rebuilt, but that's something else. I don't even answer the letters anymore when they suggest that I might like to send them some money for this. But all that's left is an outer wall around outside the playing field, around the playing fields. And I had to go there on my way from my home, which is in Chelsea, to the airport, which is at Heathrow, as we all know, to our cost. And each time I pass it, I must have passed that now thousands of times. Each time, every single time, I think, my school used to be there. I really, really miss it. And then I think about the bastards that pulled it down because they thought that it was too big or too difficult or too noisy. So please don't do it. Don't let them do it. It's worth everything you can do to people, because that's one of the things that keeps you together. At my advanced age, and I am now 64, thank you. Thank you. Is that pity or is that agreement? I have a son aged 2.5, which is a lovely experience. Not one I would have, if I'm really honest, would have actually kind of really intended to be part of, but nevertheless, now he's there, he's wonderful, and he's the light of my life. Coming here and listening to you all has made me think about him a great deal and about his schooling, and I just simply hope that he is able to go to a school half as nice as your school, and to feel half as proud of it as you feel of yours, and then he'll be a very happy boy indeed. And I'm going to train him, and I feel all the stronger for it from talking to Richard Taylor and others. I'm going to really make sure that he plays cricket extremely well and as best he possibly can, and I shall hope to be as proud of him as you are of your school. I went to Libya, very strange country indeed. Now, of course, we learn from Tony Blair and Gordon Brown and George W. Bush, that magnificent international statesman. We hear that Colonel Gaddafi is a great supporter of democracy around the world, a great ally of the West, an impressive character, and that's very nice to know, isn't it? I'm always glad when George W. Bush tells me who's a good Democrat, and I was summoned in person by Colonel Gaddafi. He wanted to say something to the world. Actually, I can't now remember what it was, really, but I went there. And we went, and he lives a lot of his time, at any rate, in a tent in the desert. And it didn't look very comfortable to me. He came into the tent, and he was, he's always a bit odd, of course, but this time, even I felt my breath was taken away. He was wearing, you can have straw hats in the shape of a trilby. Why not? But it's unusual if you're going to do a television interview, and more unusual still if it's on sideways, with a kind of pointy bit down that end, and a round bit with the curly brim this way in straw. Interesting choice of headwear. And a band around it, and it meant, of course, that those two sort of brass-bound holes, presumably, to let the steam out or whatever, they were directly above his face, his eyes. That was strange. I was praying, of course, that nobody was going to take it off. He had this fly whisk with which he flicked away the flies. Television cameras are great things. They're magnificent pieces of equipment, but even close up, they're not very good at detecting flies in the air. So poor old Gaddafi looked as though he was really sort of whipping himself as he sat there and confessed that his role in the Lockerbie bombing had been greater than he had hitherto agreed. So that was quite good too. And at the end of the interview, I noticed nothing else particularly. At the end of the interview, the cameraman came to me and he said, John, there was some noise on that interview. So I said, what do you mean noise? So he said, he's a modest man. He said, personal noise. So I said, what are you talking about? I said, I didn't hear anything. But then, of course, I forgot that in a television interview, you put a little microphone sort of there, usually, and it picks up, clearly, as it were, bodily noises. And so he said, no, he was... I said, what was he doing? He said, noises. So I said, was he belching? No, worse. So I said, well, he wasn't farting. And he said, yes, it was. Then when we looked at it, of course, we could see that there is Gaddafi, and he rises up out of his seat every sort of minute or so, and then he lifts up in the air, and then there is a sort of certain rumbling, and then he sinks back into his seat with a smile as of something accomplished, and all's right with the world for another. Then another minute, of course, has to be done again. I couldn't think what I've never heard a broadcast, perhaps you have, I don't know, but I never heard a broadcast where, the broadcaster said, Colonel Gaddafi broke wind continually during our interview. I just couldn't think of the words to do it in. So, being a good BBC man, I just left it out, really. But we could hear the noise, and to those cognoscenti who were aware of such things, you could see the little smile playing around his lips as the mission was accomplished each time. And but in those days, I was allowed, as various other people were, to write columns for the newspapers. I used to write a column, in fact, for the Sunday Telegraph, a foreign affairs column, and I wrote something about this. And there, of course, you don't have the same problems that you do on television. So I was able to say, Colonel Gaddafi broke wind continually during our interview. I felt quite good about that. And it's one of those, again, you know, even in newspapers, it's quite rare, isn't it? And the editor, who's a very good friend of mine, put a little headline over it that said, "Warm wind of compromise blows from Gaddafi," which I thought was very good. Anyway, many congratulations on 400 years. Not very many of you have seen all of them, of course. I'm probably the only one here who has, but I think this has been a lovely evening. And somebody said 400 more years, but why stop at 400? And why not say 4,000 more years? And if there are schools, if there are people, if those people have children, if we don't just have eggs or something by that stage, or if we're not indeed all living to that age ourselves and are each of us 4,000 years old, then I'm sure of all institutions, King James's School will be one of them. And many congratulations to each and every one of you for that marvellous period of time. Thank you.